Japan built one of the greatest reputations in watchmaking. The precision, the quality, the engineering that embarrassed Switzerland in the 70s and never really stopped. That reputation is now being used against you. In 2026, Japanese on the dial or in the listing has become a shortcut that some brands are using to skip the work. They're counting on you to trust the flag and not look under the hood. A Japanese label on a mineral glass case packed with a $30 movement should not cost $700. But people are paying it every day because the reputation is borrowed and the audit never happened. 10 traps, each one exploiting a different version of the same assumption, that Japan means quality without checking what Japan actually put inside. And the biggest trap on this list? It's not a brand, it's a single movement, and it's inside more watches than you think. Trap 10 Armani and Fossil Japanese Automatic. Start here, because this is the foundation of everything. You walk into a department store. On the counter is a watch with a name you recognize, Emporio Armani, maybe, or Michael Kors, or Fossil. The dial says, automatic. The tag might say, Japanese movement. The price is somewhere between $200 and $400. It looks sharp. The brand is associated with fashion and status. Here is what is actually inside. The movement is almost certainly a Miyota, specifically the lower tier 8215 or its variants. Miyota is a subsidiary of Citizen, which produces movements in enormous quantities at various quality levels. The 8215 is a legitimate, reliable workhorse that has been inside millions of watches without complaint. It is not a prestigious movement. It has no fancy finishing. The rotor is stamped, not decorated. The bridges are functional and unpolished. It runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour, which is the low end of automatic movements. That movement wholesale costs between $25 and $40. The fashion brand buys it, puts it inside a case that may or may not be stainless steel, snaps on their logo, and marks the price up 3 to 5 times. Not because the watch is better, but because the name on the dial commands a premium in the fashion context. They are selling the brand. The watch is the delivery mechanism for the brand. The movement is an afterthought. The Japanese movement designation is technically accurate. That's what makes it so effective as a trap. The statement is true. The implication that Japanese automatic means something comparable to what Seiko or Citizen puts in their serious watches is false. It's like saying a meal is French cuisine because the butter came from Normandy. Here's the scene this produces. Someone receives the watch as a gift. They tell people it's an automatic watch with a Japanese movement. The person they're telling assumes this means something. The buyer is proud. The watch functions fine for a few years, then the movement needs service. They take it to a watchmaker who opens it, finds the 8215, quotes $80 for a service, and says something like, "It's a nice case. The movement is a standard Miyota." The gifter finds out what was inside. The bubble deflates. What you should know. If a fashion brand watch says Japanese automatic and the price is above $150, ask which movement specifically. If they can't tell you, walk away. If it's a Miyota 8215 inches a case with minimal specifications and a non-sapphire crystal, the logo is the entire value proposition. Decide if that's what you're paying for. You're not buying a Japanese watch. You're buying a fashion brand that borrowed Japan's reputation and forgot to return it. That's the entry-level trap. Next up is a brand that actually makes extraordinary watches and also makes a line specifically designed to collect your money while you're distracted by the good ones. Trap 9. The Orient Quartz Trap. Orient is a Seiko subsidiary. Their mechanical watches, the Bambino, the Mako, the Kamasu, are among the most credible automatic watches available under and around $300. They have got genuine in-house movements, solid construction, and honest value. If you've ever researched affordable automatic watches, Orient's name came up in the recommendations because it belongs there. And then Orient releases quartz watches. These aren't in-house movements finished to Orient's mechanical standards. They're outsourced quartz calibers, the kind of movement that arrives in a generic batch and goes into cases without any brand-specific identity or adjustment. The finishing on these movements is zero. The sole, if we're being honest, is zero. They're entirely functional, they'll keep accurate time, and they're completely unremarkable in every way that makes a watch interesting to own. The trap is not that these watches are bad. They work fine. The trap is the halo effect, the assumption that Orient means you're getting the same philosophy and craft as the Bambino. You're not. The Quartz Orient watches exist because the brand has shelf space to fill and markets where quartz is what people want to buy. The mechanical line is where Orient actually cares. At $100 to $150, Orient quartz watches cost more than most generic quartz competition, and the brand name is the reason. The movement doesn't justify the premium over a generic quartz. The brand's mechanical reputation doesn't transfer to the quartz line. If you want an Orient, buy an Orient mechanical. The Bambino on a leather strap is one of the most over-delivering watches in the entire industry at its price point. The quartz lineup is a side hustle that borrows the Bambino's reputation without earning it. Orient's mechanical team works hard to build something real. Don't let their quartz team spend the credit. An afterthought from a good brand. Next is something different, a category where the trap is the entire business model. Trap 8. The Japan Moft Amazon Ghost. Liege, Benyar, and the Ghost brands. If you've searched for watches on Amazon in the last 3 years, you've encountered them. Brands with names like Liege, Benyar, Pagani Design, and dozens of others. The listings are full of professional photography, enthusiastic model names, and somewhere in the description, Japan Movement. Let's dissect what Japan Movement means in this context. In the watch industry, Japan Movement typically refers to a Miyota quartz caliber, often the Miyota 2115, which costs approximately $3 to $5 wholesale. It is a basic, reliable quartz movement. It does not make a watch interesting or valuable. It is the automotive equivalent of saying, "This car has an engine." The cases on these watches are frequently base metal, zinc alloy, often with a plating finish that looks fine in photographs and begins to degrade within months of skin contact. Sweat interacts badly with cheap plating. People have reported skin reactions from extended wear. The bracelets are often hollow and thin. The crystals are mineral glass, which scratches easily. The Japan Movement line is there specifically to borrow credibility from the Japanese watchmaking tradition. It's a shortcut designed to bypass your skepticism. Shoppers who know that Seiko and Citizen make reliable Japanese movements see Japan Movement and assume there's a connection. There isn't. A Miyota $4 quartz and a Seiko Grand Seiko 9F are both Japanese movements the same way. A garden shed and the Louvre are both buildings. The thing is, if a watch listing says Japan Movement and the price is under $100, look up the brand name. If you can't find any documentation of when it was founded, where it's based, or what its quality control process is, you have found a ghost brand. It exists to sell product. It does not exist to stand behind a product. Japan Movement on a $60 Amazon listing means one thing. Someone spent $4 on a movement and wants you to spend $60 on the myth. Ghost brands borrowing Japan's name. What's next is a brand that's entirely real and still manages to trap you if you don't know what you're looking at. Trap 7. The Seiko 5 Limited Edition Overload. This one requires some care, because Seiko 5 watches are genuinely good. The NH35 movement inside them is reliable, hackable, manually windable, and documented across decades of trouble-free ownership. At $200 to $250, a standard Seiko 5 is one of the most honest value propositions in accessible watchmaking. The trap is the limited edition model. Seiko releases a significant number of limited colorway variants of their standard Seiko 5 platform. Different dial colors, different bezel inserts, different strap combinations, occasionally a collaboration with a brand or property. These versions often command a $50 to $150 premium over the base model. Here is what changes between the standard model and the limited edition: the dial color, the bezel ring, sometimes the strap. Here is what doesn't change: the movement, the crystal, still hardlex, Seiko's proprietary mineral glass, not sapphire, the lug width, the water resistance, the core case construction. The standard line in 2026 still uses hardlex crystal. The Pro line within Seiko 5 added sapphire. This distinction is important. Before you pay the limited edition premium, check whether your specific model has sapphire crystal or hardlex. If it's hardlex, you're paying extra for a colorway. Colorway preferences are legitimate reasons to buy a watch. Fashion is real, but you should be clear-eyed about what the premium is buying. A limited edition Seiko 5 with Hardlex crystal at $350 is not a significantly better watch than a standard Seiko 5 at $200. It's a different-looking version of the same watch. If that's worth the difference to you, buy it. If you thought you were getting an upgrade, you didn't. Seiko makes good watches. They also make limited edition versions of their good watches that are really just the same good watch in a more expensive outfit. A good brand with a color problem. What's next is a brand where the problem isn't the watch, it's the math. Trap 6. The overpriced Seiko mod, paying $600 for a $70 watch. Seiko modding is a legitimate and creative hobby. Taking a Seiko SKX or a 5 Sports platform, swapping the dial, hands, bezel insert, and sometimes the case, producing something that looks genuinely unique and can be tuned to precise personal preferences. The community around Seiko mods is active, skilled, and produces some genuinely impressive results. The problem is what happens when someone turns that hobby into a business and prices it incorrectly. Here is the bill of materials for a typical custom Seiko mod sold on Instagram or Etsy for $500 to $700. The movement is Seiko NH35A, which at wholesale cost approximately $43 to $120. This is the exact same movement inside a standard Seiko 5 Sports at $200. The case. An aftermarket case purchased from suppliers on Alibaba or AliExpress, typically in the $30 to $60 range. The dial aftermarket costs $15 to $40. The hands go for $10 to $20. The bezel and insert cost $10 to $30. The strap costs $10 to $25. So, total component cost at retail is roughly $100 to $175. Total component cost at the prices available to a small business buying in small quantities, even less. You are being charged $500 to $700 for assembly labor, the social media presence that made you aware of it, and the creative vision behind the combination. Those things have value, but buyers often don't understand that the movement inside is identical to the one in a $200 production watch, and that the aftermarket case has no documented service history, no quality control beyond visual inspection, and no brand warranty. The specific problem is that the NH35 inside a mod watch needs service in 5 years. A qualified watchmaker can handle it for $50 to $80. The case itself, if a gasket fails or a stem breaks, may be from a supplier that no longer stocks that reference. There's no manufacturer to call. The mod shop may or may not still exist. Buy mods because you love what someone built. Don't buy them under the assumption that the price reflects the components inside. There's a version of this trap that's particularly common on Instagram. A modder builds something genuinely beautiful, a clean homage to a vintage reference with a textured dial and specific hands that create something cohesive and well-proportioned. The photography is excellent. They price it at $650. Someone buys it, feeling like they've discovered something special. Then they go to an authorized watchmaker for a service 5 years later. The watchmaker opens it, finds the NH35 and an aftermarket case from a supplier they've never heard of, and explains that they can service the movement easily but cannot order gaskets or a replacement stem for the case because there's no documented part number. The buyer now has a watch that works but can't be properly maintained through normal channels. The mod was honest work. The buyer just didn't know what they were buying. A Seiko mod is someone's creative work. Know what you're paying for, the art, not the engineering. Creative work priced for the art, not the parts. Next is a genuine engineering quirk that gets sold as luxury and fails the moment someone watches the second-hand. Trap 5. The Miyota 8215 stutter trap, paying premium for a shaky second-hand. This is the most technically specific trap on the list, and it requires a brief engineering lesson. Automatic watch movements drive the seconds hand through a gear train. There are 2 ways to do this. Directly, where the seconds hand is attached directly to a wheel in the main gear train, or indirectly, where an additional set of gears connects the seconds hand to the main train. Direct drive is more expensive to engineer. Indirect drive is cheaper and simpler. The Miyota 8215 and the entire 82XX series of movements uses indirect drive. The result is a documented phenomenon known as the Miyota stutter. When the watch receives a lateral shock, your wrist moving quickly, a bump against a surface, the motion of being picked up sharply, the seconds hand visually freezes for up to 2 seconds, then snaps forward to catch up. It looks, unambiguously, like the watch has stopped and then jumped. The watch hasn't broken. The timekeeping is not affected. The movement is working exactly as designed. But it looks broken. Here is the trap. Micro brands charging $600 to $900 for watches powered by the Miyota 8215 are selling you a watch with a cosmetic characteristic that looks like a defect. Their photography doesn't show it, their marketing doesn't mention it. You find out when you're wearing it at dinner and someone at the table says, "I think your watch stopped." The fix is simple. Pay slightly more or choose more carefully. The Miyota 9015, the higher-tier Miyota movement, uses direct drive, no stutter, smoother sweep, better finishing. Brands using the 9015 are making a more serious investment in the movement. Seiko's NH35 uses direct drive as well. Here is the detection method. If you're looking at a watch and you want to know whether it has the 8215 or the 9015, the 9015 beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour, and the 8215 beats at 21,600. The listing, or the brand's specification page, will include this number if they're being transparent. Higher beat rate means the seconds hand moves in smaller, more frequent increments, smoother in appearance. Lower beat rate means larger steps that are more visible. Combined with the indirect drive of the 8215, you get the stutter. A brand charging over $600 and using the 8215 is a brand that looked at the choice between a $30 movement and a $45 to $55 movement and chose to pocket the difference. That decision tells you something about how they think about the buyer. If a brand charges over $600 for a watch and uses the 8215, they chose the cheaper movement and kept the difference. That is information about their priorities. A $600 watch that looks broken every time you check the time failed the most basic test. Don't buy the stutter. A movement that looks broken while keeping perfect time. Next is a brand that sells itself on customization, and the math behind the custom option doesn't add up. Trap 4. The Knot. Build your own trap. Knot is a Japanese watch brand built around the concept of the custom watch experience. You visit their website or their store, select a case, select a dial, select hands, select a strap, and assemble a combination that is uniquely yours. It's a compelling concept. Watch customization appeals to the same instinct as bespoke tailoring. The movements inside most Knot watches are quartz calibers or basic automatics, nothing that distinguishes itself at the price points the combinations reach. The cases are competent, but not exceptional. The dials have aesthetic merit, clean, Japanese minimalist, well-designed in many cases. The strap options are good. But when you build a combination that you like, picking the case, dial, hands, and strap that actually appeals to you, the total frequently reaches $400 to $550. For that money, you have a watch with a basic movement, a non-sapphire crystal in some configurations, and no secondary market value. The build-your-own positioning adds perceived value, but the components don't support the price. The secondary market reality. Used Knot watches sell for small fractions of their original price. Not because they're bad watches, they're competent and nicely finished, but because the brand's value is experiential. You paid for the process of choosing. That experience is over the moment the watch ships. The watch itself, on the open market, is valued at what the components suggest it's worth. This isn't a reason to never buy a Knot, it's a reason to be clear-eyed. You're paying for an experience and a design exercise, not for a watch that will hold value or outperform its price point on specifications. If the experience is worth it to you, that's a legitimate purchase. Just don't confuse the custom process for quality. Knot sells you the joy of building. The watch you build is still what it is. Customization that charges for the process. Next is a watch that millions of people own, and that is genuinely excellent, except when someone charges you premium rates for the standard version. Trap 3. The NH 35. Epidemic. When a $30 engine powers an $800 watch. The Seiko NH35A is one of the most successful mechanical movements ever made. It is robust, hackable, manually windable, accurate to roughly -10 to +30 seconds per day, and backed by decades of documented reliability. Watchmakers worldwide know it intimately. Parts are available everywhere. Service is cheap and straightforward. It is genuinely a great movement for the price. The wholesale price for the NH35A to small businesses is approximately $28 to $34. In 2026, a meaningful number of luxury micro-brand watches, brands with polished Instagram presences, editorial quality photography, vocabulary like heritage, artisanal, and hand-finished, are charging $600 to $900 for watches powered by this movement. The math. You are paying $600 to $900 for $30 worth of movement, plus a case, plus a dial, plus a strap, plus a logo, plus the cost of the photography, plus the Instagram ads, plus the founder's margin. This is not inherently wrong. All watches have markup. But the question is whether the case, the dial, and the finishing justify the position they're claiming relative to the competition. For $350 to $500, a well-built watch with an NH35 can be excellent value. San Martin's Grade 5 titanium dive watch at around $400 with an NH35 is honest. The money went into the case material and the finishing, and the movement is appropriate for the price. That's a fair trade. For $700 to $900 with an NH35, you need to ask, what else is here? Is the case finishing genuinely exceptional? Is the dial hand-applied or printed? Is the crystal sapphire? Does the brand have a service infrastructure? Or is the price justified primarily by brand aesthetics and marketing spend? The forensic audit is simple. Look up the movement. If it's NH35 and the price is above $500, the rest of the watch needs to carry exceptional weight. If it doesn't, you're funding someone's lifestyle brand. The NH35 is an honest movement. The question is whether the rest of the watch is honest about what it costs. The honest movement in a dishonest package. What's next is a case study in misleading materials. Two different watches, two very different price realities, and most people can't tell which is which from a photograph. Trap 2. The Casio Vintage Metal Plating Deception. The Casio A168 and its relatives are genuine icons. The digital display, the silver-toned case. The calculator sibling, the A168, has been sold for decades, and the design is legitimately timeless, worn by everyone from students to off-duty architects. There is no irony in owning one. But here is what the case is made of. The silver, or gold finish, on the Casio A series watches is chrome plating, or gold plating, applied over resin. The structural case material is polycarbonate. You are wearing a plastic watch with a metallic coat. For $30 to $40, this is perfectly fine. It's a Casio. It's honest about what it is at that price. Nobody buying a $35 Casio expects surgical stainless. The trap is what happens when the hype around vintage Casio aesthetics inflates prices on the secondary market or drives boutique, limited edition versions into the $70 to $120 range. At those prices, you are paying significant money for plated plastic. The plating will scratch. The plating will peel over time with daily wear. The structural material underneath is resin. Casio does make metal-cased digital watches. The MWD200H, the newer GA series models, and others use genuine stainless steel. These are better materials, and they behave like metal. But the iconic A series that benefits from the vintage hype? Resin. This is not a reason to not buy one. It's a reason to know what you're buying. At $35, a plastic Casio is a sensible, charming, historically interesting object. At $100 for a limited edition version of the same chassis, you are paying $65 for the colorway and the story. The Casio A168 is one of the great watch designs of the last 50 years. It is also plastic. Both of these things are true at the same time. Plated plastic with a great story. And the last one, the biggest trap, is bigger than any brand. It's hiding inside watches at every price point. Trap 1, the Citizen Mall Eco Drive, the oversized chronograph tax. This is the most widespread trap on the list, and the hardest to see coming, because Citizen makes genuinely extraordinary watches. The caliber 0100, which achieves 1 second of accuracy per year, is one of the most impressive timekeeping achievements in history. The ProMaster line is legitimate professional tool watches. The higher EcoDrive models are clean, thoughtful, and well executed. And then there's the mall. Walk into a mid-tier department store, find the watch counter, look at the Citizen section. What you'll see is a specific category: oversized chronographs, often in the 44 to 47 millimeters range, with multiple subdials, heavy use of printed information on the dial, and cases frequently described as bold or sport. These are the Citizen watches that department store buyers purchase because they look impressive under glass at full retail. The problem is not that they're bad watches. EcoDrive solar technology is genuinely excellent. It is light-powered, no battery replacement, reliable. The problem is that these specific models represent a set of design choices optimized for looking impressive in a display case rather than functioning well on a wrist. At 44 to 47 millimeters with a thickness to match, these watches are physically too large for most wrists to wear comfortably. The lug-to-lug distance often exceeds 50 millimeters. They hang off the end of a 6.5-inch wrist and look like someone duct-taped a clock face to their arm. The multiple subdials and printed information create visual clutter that makes it difficult to quickly read the time, the one thing a watch is supposed to do. The crystals on most of these models are mineral glass rather than sapphire. At $300 to $500, which is where these models are priced, sapphire crystal is achievable and standard on competing options. There is a specific buying moment this trap targets. Someone walks in wanting to spend $400 on a watch as a gift or a personal upgrade. They haven't done research. They look at the display case. The big Citizen chronograph looks impressive, multiple subdials, bold presence under the glass, a price that feels like it represents significant quality. They buy it. It goes on the wrist. The lug-to-lug is 52 millimeters. It hangs off the wrist like a small piece of furniture. The multiple subdials are hard to read quickly. The mineral glass picks up a scratch from the car door within 2 months. They return to the store, and the salesperson says, "That's mineral glass. It scratches. That's normal." The right Citizen to buy at $300, $500 is the ProMaster or the EcoDrive titanium line watches built around function and wearing comfort. The mall chronograph exists for the display case, not the wrist. Citizen makes some of the most technically interesting watches in the world. The mall chronograph is what happens when a good engineering company lets the shelf do the design work. 10 traps, 1 pattern. Japan's watchmaking reputation is real. Seiko, Citizen, Grand Seiko, Casio at its engineering peak, Orient at its mechanical best. These represent genuine achievements that took decades to build. That reputation is the most valuable thing on the Japanese watch industry's balance sheet, and every single trap on this list is someone borrowing that reputation without paying for it. The fashion brand borrows it by printing Japanese automatic on a watch they didn't engineer. The Amazon Ghost borrows it with Japan movement on a $4 quartz. The limited edition Hype Machine borrows it by putting a new color on an existing watch and calling it special. The micro brand borrowing it charges $800 for a $30 movement and calls it heritage. The mod seller borrows it by associating their work with Seiko's reputation rather than their own. The forensic audit is not complicated. You just have to do it. Movement name. Look it up. What does it cost wholesale? What's it inside at other brands? Crystal material. Hardlex scratches. Sapphire doesn't. Case material. Stainless or base metal. Who makes this brand and how long have they existed? Does the secondary market price reflect what they're charging? These questions take 5 minutes. They will save you hundreds of dollars. And here's the thing about knowing them. Once you've done the audit a few times, it becomes automatic. You stop seeing the name on the dial and start seeing the spec sheet. You stop asking, "Is this Japanese?" and start asking, "Which Japanese?" Those are very different questions with very different answers. Japan is still the king of value watchmaking. The trap is assuming Japanese means the same thing every time it appears. It doesn't, and now you know how to check. Are you going to be avoiding any of these watches, or will you still buy them anyway? Let me know in the comments as you like this video and subscribe to this channel for more.